We have 45 million borrowers who owe a collective $1.7 trillion in student loan debt in this country. And so that actually makes student loans the second largest class of consumer debt in this country. And so it's only second to mortgages. And so what we see is with this much outstanding debt, the ripple effects of this crisis are really stretching across our communities and across our economy. And what's so interesting now is, especially as we're grappling right now with the economic crisis, before millions of families have even recovered from the last one in coming out of the Great Recession, student debt really threatens to exacerbate a lot of the ongoing economic fallout that we're seeing in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic.
If we forgive the student loan, people will be able to start families, buy houses, start businesses. It's really lifting the burdens on this next generation from pursuing their dreams.
And so, we tell students that education is a tool for social mobility, and we really encourage, students to get degrees. But what we've seen time and time again is that the crisis of student debt is really hampering economic opportunity for millions of student loan borrowers. And so it was almost like that student debt is casting a shadow over our communities. For example, 20 years after starting college, the typical Black borrower still owes about 95% of their original student loan balance, while the median white borrower was paid almost 95% of their balance at that same time. And then in a similar vein, we've seen research that the typical Latino borrower still owes 83% of their initial balance, compared to the median white borrower who's paid down nearly half of their balance about 12 years after starting college.
So former students of for-profit schools like the defunct Corinthian colleges are in particular need of student loan relief and assistance. These are the clients that we see the most, and it's not just the former Corinthian schools. There are existing schools out there. There are many schools that shut down because of government enforcement actions, or they went bankrupt because their ability to get federal student loans was cut off due to their unlawful activity. But many of these students were lured in with false and misleading promises of high-paying jobs, and they ended up saddled with tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. A lot of it federal student loan, and some of it additionally private student loan debt. Currently, there are over 1 million students enrolled in for-profit schools, and studies have shown that for-profit college students are less likely to graduate, more likely to default on their student loans, and more likely to end up with higher debt burdens. The for-profit sector preys on low-income and students of color, pushing them to take on student loan debt. That's their business model. They want to get the federal student loan money, and there's a limit on how much they can get. They're supposed to get, I think, only up to 90% of their funding can be federal to be eligible for federal financial aid funds. And so these schools often lure them or sign them up into predatory private student loans to make up the difference. African American and Latino students are overrepresented in for-profit colleges, and they often do not make it to graduation, but they're still saddled with thousands of dollars of student loan debt.
I had over $13,000 in student debt. It impacted my life significantly. As mentioned earlier by somebody, I was actually denied a position to a job. I took a free bank training course, and I was then hired, about to be in prospect of being hired, but I was denied the opportunity because my debt to income ratio was too high.
When I was getting recruited into the school, they said, we don't have any financial aid or scholarships available, but if you take out the debt, the loan, you'll get a high-paying job. You'll be able to pay it off in a reasonable amount of time. We'll guarantee that you find something that's suitable for the payments, and none of that happened. It was almost like they just needed to say that just to get me in the door so they could get the money. But as soon as I graduated, just communication started getting slower. It didn't seem fair. I had to work multiple jobs after I graduated just to keep the payments going, because our goal was we didn't want our credit to get affected because we wanted to buy a house. So we paid on time every time, but that came with a cost, a sacrifice of what we were able to do. So we were living just to pay debt.
I feel like I was really deceived by the recruiters. I'm a first generation college student. I was actually raised by my grandparents. So navigating the system at 19 years old was very misleading for me. I thought that, in order to be successful, in order to have a prosperous future, I shouldn't have put a limit on financial burden of education. But I come to find out later that, those numbers really, they weren't a realistic thing based off what job I was able to get, which was none in the career that I was going for. And that was really hard for me.
We need to forgive those loans, and we have the capacity to forgive those loans. The president has the power, of executive power, to say that debt student loans can be forgiven. How do we know this? Because the president has already exercised the power to delay student loans. So if you can delay loans and you can say that people don't have to pay them back for a while, why it's the same authority that gives you the power to forgive those loans.